I'm going to say it now. Francisco Lindor is going into the Hall of Fame as one of our New York Mets.
That's a bold statement.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what else. I think Francisco Lindor is the Robert Trujillo of baseball.
You mean the bass player in Metallica?
Yeah.
The one that I taught how to play bass for Injustice for All?
What? You taught Robert Trujillo of Metallica, their bass player, how to play bass? You got to tell us that story.
Well, if I don't poop my pants first.
Why is Francisco Lindor the Robert Trujillo of baseball? Why might Ray poop his pants? We'll get into all of this today. Hey, this is my friend, Ray.
What's up? This is my friend AD.
Ray is a tour manager who's traveled the world with everyone from the Beastie Boys to the Rolling Stones, engineered artists from Devo to Jane's Addiction to Tony Braxton, and looked after the careers of comics like Jim Gaffigan and Dane Cook.
And AD is a national radio personality, heard on stations across the country, who started off as a major label recording artist that gave me my first job as a tour manager.
I still can't believe that ended well.
Well, we still talk all the time now, and when we do, it's about music and cooking and baseball, especially our beloved New York Mets.
This is Bands, Barbecue, and Baseball. So, Ray, how you doing today?
I'm good. I just got to have a word with the guys who make the teas around here. They make Throat Coat and Smooth Move a little too close for comfort looking to each other.
Oh, what, the boxes to... You mean the boxes to your throat coat that you use to lubricate your talker during these podcasts look similar to the box that you use to lubricate other stuff during other situations?
And in that mode, let's start this podcast because I don't know which one I grabbed.
Let's make haste before you make waste. So wait a second. I'm glad I ate before and not after. So question for you. Do you actually use, I guess it's like diuretic tea, like to move things along?
Well, being a man in my 50s, it's a lot more helpful nowadays than say when I was in my spry 20s and 30s. So yeah, I particularly like I like AIDS. I like not that kind of AIDS. I'm talking about help. I like things that help.
So, but my point is, it does help. You drink this tea and stuff gets moving right along.
Between tea and Metamucil and all these other fibers and natural things. I mean, tea's a natural thing. Just the fact that it's a diuretic. Hey, if you want your pee to smell, eat plenty of asparagus. You know what I mean? If that's a goal of yours, then eat your damn asparagus.
I don't even have to look at asparagus. I don't even have to eat asparagus for that to happen. All I have to do is look at asparagus or think about eating asparagus. And my body seems to react. It's unbelievable. You can have a teeny tiny little corner of a piece of an asparagus spear. And the next time you go to the bathroom, everybody within a 5-block radius knows about it. It's the weirdest thing.
I wake up in the morning and the coffee pot goes on, and even before I've had my first cup, I can tell my wife, "Oh, coffee's working."
Oh, so that's how you keep the romance alive. That's awesome.
Yeah, we're tight.
Well, it's not after a mishap with the tea. So speaking of things moving right along, let's talk about Lindor's contract extension.
I think that's a totally good thing, especially, I mean, right now you and I record this on Sundays.
Yeah.
Right now, literally where we're sitting at, it certainly looks like we're on the cusp of having some good news, a good announcement. It's just the tension now building up to, hey, let's get this done.
Yeah. To our tens of listeners who might be listening to this after the fact, if Lindor has already signed his contract extension, you know that we did this on a Sunday. But this Sunday, as we're looking at it, just, to timestamp what we're talking about, we know that Steve Cohen said he would crowdsource the pay for Lindor on Twitter. And then we also know that they went out to dinner. He said that Lindor had the chicken parmesan. He had the ravioli. The ravioli wasn't so good, but the contract talk seemed to be going well. And if you are like the vast majority of us, you don't think he'd be so happy-go-lucky and goofy talking about it in this way if things weren't headed in the right direction, right?
I would love to see one who picked up the check, because that would be a teller right there and then. Because first of all, if I'm Lindor and I just was about to sign on the dotted line with that many, I would literally at the end go, I'll get that.
Yeah. As it turns out, I'm actually fine. Like I don't need you to pay for my chicken parm. Let's just.
Well, I've been to Port St. Lucie, and I've been to not in quite a while, but I've been to Port St. Lucie. There's nothing around there. I don't even know where the hell they actually went to eat, because when I was there several years back for spring training, it was a ghost town. Maybe it's not anymore, and I'm certainly not trying to besmirch the greater Port Lucie area. But from what I remember of that section or area, I don't recall there being too many 4-star Michelin James Beard Award winning restaurants. So they might have literally hit a Denny's or something.
Yeah. Anywhere you can get egg noodles and ketchup. Florida's so weird like that, because who lives in Florida? Old New Yorkers. What do old New Yorkers care about? Italian food. And so there's a bazillion Italian restaurants, some of which are okay, some of which are amazing, and then some of which are like, New Yorkers are coming here from Italy. Like, Italian New Yorkers are coming here. How could you possibly serve this? It's a weird contradiction.
But there is also the dividing section, the east coast of Florida to the west coast of Florida. A lot more of the Italians, New York and Chicago based, kind of really went down to the west coast of Florida more than the east coast. And the east coast, still obviously a lot of New Yorkers, et cetera, like that. But there's a lot more of a Jewish contingency there and everything. So I couldn't vouch necessarily for East Coast Florida Italian food. I can vouch for West Coast Florida Italian food, which is also hit and miss as well, as you were just saying. But it does exist, and there is a contingency, there is a representation of New York, Chicago, etc. on the West Coast of Florida.
All like my Italian family and all the people I know that are Italian from New York, when they go out to eat, like if they're not eating Italian, they eat Chinese. Everybody's ancient grandma in Williamsburg will be like, they've got great veal piccata here, they got great chicken parmesan there, or we go for Chinese. It's like there's two types of food that exist to them, Chinese and Italian, and maybe deli occasionally.
Yeah. I can vouch for that, being out here on the West Coast, in terms of the same kind of divisions, same kind of allegiances, same kind of pockets of good deli, pockets of good Italian, pockets of good Chinese. Oh yeah, because you for those that don't know, Ray lives in Palm Springs, and Palm Springs obviously a beautiful part of the world. And if you're a tour manager extraordinaire like Ray does, that does a lot of work based off the West Coast, it's an amazing place to live. But it's also sort of like it is in some senses a little Floridian in that people go there to retire, right? Yeah, retire, as well as it's a bit more of a destination, a touristy destination. So there are in existence. Palm Springs, say downtown Palm Springs, has come a long way in just the last couple of years with an expansion, and then the other small towns, that all incorporate as the Coachella Valley, Palm Desert and Rancho Mirage and Indian Wells and Coachella and Indio, etc. There's a great diverse amount of foods. Obviously, fantastic Mexican food. I mean, I can't say enough about the Mexican food, because everybody, when I was living in Nashville, and my other California friends that were moving and living in Nashville as well, can attest that they couldn't find Mexican. It was like pin a tail on a donkey on a map with blindfolds on. You could not find a good Mexican there. Here you can fall out of a deck chair and land in good Mexican out here.
I never trusted taco trucks until I moved to Texas. Like the idea, maybe it was a formative experience. I had a horrible experience eating street meat in Queens once. I got food poisoning. It was I actually thought I was dying for a second. And but I was just okay, no more street vendors involving cooked meat products, certainly not pork. And So it took me years to start trusting taco trucks in Houston, where they have fantastic Mexican food as well. What's interesting? Where do you fall down on the Tex-Mex Cali-Mex divide in terms of the food? Because I've got so many friends, I've got so many friends in Houston that and they talk about it, like Mexican families in Houston versus Mexican families in California, when they have sort of family reunions, or you're doing what to the carne asada, burritos with French fries in them. What the hell is wrong with you, man?
Yeah, I find it's almost a division. Like for instance, Italians, the division in Italians between North, South, Sicily, etc., like that. They're all regional members first, and then Italian second, and that source of pride and everything also relates to their indigenous foods, and that are much more regional. And I would attest that, say Tex-Mex, which I've had a lot of experience on the road with, especially in Austin, being working with a lot of different artists there. Obviously, San Antonio and Houston, etc. It's almost a different animal. It is its own unique take on Mexican, and then the Southwest out here, obviously the Phoenix area and Southern California, is a whole nother Mexican. And then go to Mexico City, that is that's a whole bunch of Mexican that you do not find in almost any other places.
Oh yes, so the best Mexican food I've ever had, surprise surprise, was in Mexico. But it was. Have you ever had this stuff sickelpock? I'm probably to people that know how to pronounce sickelpock. Excuse me, I'm sure I'm butchering it, but you ever had it?
From that word and how you said it, I don't know if I ever have. I don't even. I'm being. I'm not even being facetious. I don't even know what that is.
Well, neither did I until I went there. I tried it and I was like, oh, this is. I was like, look at these assortments of sort of salsy looking dip things. I will try some of it. And then I tried it. I was like, oh my God, this is freaking ridiculous. This is the greatest thing I have ever tasted. And I asked the waiter, I was like, what is this? And he was like, sickelpock. I was like, this means nothing to me, and I apologize for my ignorance, but what is it? And he was like, it's mostly pumpkin seeds. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah, and some spices. He was like, but that thing that you're eating right there, I was like, I've never had anything like it. He was like, we eat it all the time in this region of Mexico, but this is a recipe that is thousands and thousands of years old. I was like, what do you mean? He was like, well, an old recipe. He's like, this is pre-Cortez. I was like, pre-Cortez? He's like, yeah, before Cortez came over from Spain and did, the conquering and the colonizing and the plundering and all of the above. This is what our indigenous ancestors ate. So this is a recipe that goes back a really, really long way. And it was not dissimilar to, what you might think of. It tasted like a type of salsa, but nothing like I'd ever had before. And I straight up haven't found it since I got back. And it's one of the single most delicious things I've ever had. But I was just, it was a naive thing, because I have lived in Texas for a long time. I've lived in California for a long time. I've lived in Vegas for a long time. I've lived a lot of places that are a hop, skip, and a jump away from going to Mexico. But for whatever reason, I'd never actually made it to Mexico until somewhat recently. So eating, legit pre-Cortez, pre-colonizing and conquering food was just, it was amazing. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life.
Now that you've described the ingredients of it and everything like that, yes, I have had it, and it is delicious. And while we're talking about dominating certain forms and appetites, I think that Lindor's appetite for being in New York.
The smooth move tea must be working, because you're back on topic. Or you brought us back on topic.
That was a sideways smooth move. But I think that if I was Lindor, I would feel, one, that I'm sitting in the driver's seat of this scenario, which obviously I think he is, because of the factors of, yes, there's a large class of very talented shortstops that are coming free agents or potentially will be free agents after the 21 season. He has not. I mean, it's not like he had a drastic drop off in the shortened season last year in 2020. His numbers were down a little bit, but 60 games is not to me a very accurate sample of last year as example of Trevor Bauer's Cy Young Award. Anyway, but hold on, a quick other off ramp. Like, have you have you been following the scuttlebutt with Trevor Bauer's spin rate and how like basically? Do you know what happened with him in the Astros a couple years ago? No, but please actually enlighten me, because I had intentionally been avoiding anything related to him. Even like if he fell down like if he tripped on a banana peel, fell down a set of stairs, and they had the whole thing on videotape, I'd probably be inclined to watch it. But any of his starts or anything, I have no interest in even watching the guy. So enlighten me.
It was fun watching the Seattle. It was fun seeing that the Seattle Mariners took him deep 3 times. I think it was, and his, like, when people went, what happened? When the accounting department called the front office and were like, what did you purchase? What exactly did we pay for? And when the press went, what did we pay for? Like, he went, I just wasn't really trying. Like, oh, that's great, fantastic. Turning. Okay. Well, maybe when you get into the regular,
that'll be his excuse. The last game of the season, that when they're just battling the Padres to get into the playoffs, well, he can use the same excuse then.
It's like, here's the thing: when you're being paid tens of millions of dollars a year to do what you do, if you're being paid record-setting amounts of money, people like to know that you try. It's just like, you don't have to. We don't expect you to win every single time. You don't have to strike out everyone. You don't have to throw a perfect game. But we like to know that you tried. But
no, I bet there's a whole bunch of Dodger fans that are looking at his $40 million a year and saying, no, I don't even want just trying. I expect him to throw 3 no-hitters this season. I expect him, if he doesn't strike out 10 people in a game, it's considered an off game for him. Like, I'm sure the bar is high for him. And I mean, obviously the bar is high for anybody, say like Lindor, who This is his year.
Well, hold on. Do you want to know what happened with Bauer and the spin rate?
I apologize. Yes. What was his spin rate deal?
Well, the spin rate deal is several years ago. I think it was a few seasons back. The world was noticing that, I believe, I'm 99% sure it was the Houston Astros, the spin rate that the pitchers were using. The spin rate that the pitchers on the Astros were achieving was really something. And he was like, I think he went on Twitter. He's like, we all know how they're doing it. It's foreign substances on the ball. I can't remember his exact words, but he basically said, yeah, how they're doing it is cheating. And it was sort of, the sense was that over the last couple of years, a bit of a blind eye had been turned to this. And almost immediately after he said that, Trevor, his spin rate started going through the roof. And now there's talk that the MLB is cracking down and be like, oh, what, you just got paid $40 million to pitch. And now, everybody thinks that you're using some sort of foreign substance on the ball. Can't do that anymore. I guess you're going to have to figure something else out, Bauer. But who knows? Like, this is totally speculative. We're not accusing Trevor Bauer of putting something on the ball that much. And we'll have to see how this all plays out. But it was amazing. It was a bit of a karmic baseball loop where he was like, they're cheating. And then people went, oh, you're cheating the same way you said they're cheating. And everyone's turning a blind eye to it. And now it might be time to pay the baseball piper for old Trevor. But back to Lindor.
Well, Lindor is sitting in the driver's seat in terms of he's basically in control of what his destiny is, and I have all faith in the world in not only in Sandy but at the Mets front office in doing not only with the right thing by them, doing the right thing by Lindor. We certainly traded a fair amount of good players to get him here, and I would consider a 1-year rental on him to be an absolute waste. And
we lose Jimenez and Rosie over to get a 1-year rental of Lindor and watch him go somewhere else. It would be a freaking travesty. Because I was telling friends of mine that were bumming about losing Lindor, Indians fans. I was like, I think you got a Hall of Famer. I think I think Jimenez is is you're going to see absolutely incredible things from him. He was freaking electric behind the plate and on the field last year, and he just got called up. Like I was just like, you're gonna see a guy that gets in and does all the things that he's supposed to do, all the things he's expected to do. This is a guy who's reliable. You can set your watch by him. He lets you breathe a sigh of relief, and he's producing at the plate, and he is producing in clutch moments. And I think that if we don't get Lindor locked up and we wave goodbye to that, and I like this is you and me talking here, but I have to imagine, the Mets are professionals. They have scouts. They understand what, the potential upside is in a player like that can just come out of the minors and turn it on. I think they know that it would be a travesty if we don't get Lindor locked up.
There's also the reality of how many other teams across baseball are in the mode of spending $300+ million on players, combined with teams who can do it, right? That have already done that and are not looking to spend that much more in expanding their rosters. So, for instance, I don't consider the Yankees, after they've now signed Garrett Cole to a $300+ million deal and gave DJ LeMahieu what they gave him, and they'll be sucking on that Stanton contract forever. I don't necessarily believe that if a player like Lindor became available, that the Yankees, we're talking the Yankees, would necessarily be in play for him. And I mean, certainly not the Pirates, and certainly not the like teams that are on the bottom rung of expenses and everything. So that's one determining factor, that we're in New York. We are a big market team, and it's not even finally we're going to spend like a big market team. There's no choice but to spend like a big market team. And I would put it that the Mets under Steve Cohen, and I hope that's for the longest time, I don't think we will ever have a payroll that's one below, say, that like a $200 million a year payroll that's going to escalate every year. And in terms of the other teams, I think we're going to be second or third highest payroll in baseball consistently every year, with the fluctuations that might happen next year with the negotiations of the CBA and a potential strike or a potential work stoppage, etc. New rules that might come in now as far as what the luxury tax actually rises to, or even possibly disappears. Mm-hmm. I mean, in these crazy negotiations. So for the Mets to spend, say, $300 million plus on a player like Lindor, who's proven what he can do, and lock him up for roughly 10 years, that is the price of admission. And yes, I know there's foibles to it, and there's a whole history of contracts that have been signed that teams, the minute they've signed them, have not been happy. Colorado Rockies probably had no they should have known what they were doing when they signed Arenado, because they've never been happy with that deal. What are they going to do with Trevor Story coming up? They're going to do the same exact thing, and also
it's the same. Player? Like, I mean, I don't. Who's the guy that owns the Indians? What's his name?
Oh my God, I can't remember.
I can't remember either. But like you pointed out that he did that interview where a couple years ago they offered, what was it, 200 million, 250 million to
200 million.
Yeah, and he said no. Like Lindor said no, and it became very obvious it's going to take somewhere closer to 300 million to get this guy to commit, and we can't afford to do that. We can't give somebody $300 million and have anything but spare parts on the team. You can't. And that, credit to the Indians. I know people were so sad to see him go, and who wouldn't be, but credit to the Indians for recognizing that you can't win with a star player and nothing else. And so, I mean, and you're totally right. We should be one of the highest payrolls because we're in New York City, which, the population density, the number of Mets fans in New York City, the ones that are going to be going to games, knock on wood, when we can go to games again, the ones that are going to be buying merchandise, this dictates money coming in that is going to exceed, Cincinnati or St. Louis or any of those other places that, have there's less people there to help fund your pricey moves. And not only that, we have the single richest owner in professional baseball right now, who happens to be a ginormous fan. So yeah, we should, and it's funny, like I've always gotten, a little bit out of being the plucky underdogs. I think there's a big reason why you see a lot of Charlie Brown Mets stuff online. I think there's a certain relatability to that mindset for Mets fans of like, oh well, we suck again, rain cloud over me. And I think a big part of that is a huge shift in, I think this is all a huge shift in our psychology as fans and their psychology as a team. We're like, hold on, we're a big market team. We've got someone who's willing to spend like a big market team. And I think you're right. It's strange to hear someone say we're going to be one of the highest payrolls in baseball and have it look like it's going to be the truth, because that was just not the case for as long as any of us can remember. But I think that's exactly where we're headed. Strange, but true.
Yeah, and notice to Cleveland Indian fans, Jimenez is the real deal. And in 6 years from now, when you can't afford to keep him because he's a future Hall of Famer, the way Lindor was, we can work that. We can work that again, because I'll make it the comparison to owning a thoroughbred racehorse. You own a thoroughbred racehorse. It's not just the cost of buying the horse. It's the stable. It's the maintenance. It's the food. Hey, you got to feed that thing every day. Mm-hmm. Wow, this horse, you got to feed this horse every day. It's all the related expenses, etc., like that. And to me, signing a Lindor and giving him, a 10-year guaranteed deal and, all of that, I'm totally curious as to what our backup plan is if we sign Lindor. And he did get injured. Mm-hmm. It happens. Mm-hmm. The train does not stop, and we're now in the mode of being a playoff contending team. It's our flexibility and our ability to deal with the inevitable injuries is going to be as a big investment and important thing as that $300 or so million that we're going to be paying to Lindor, hopefully. Mm-hmm. I hear the writing on the wall already about Conforto, etc. And there's the talk always of the fact that he's represented by Boris, and Boris will insist that he goes to free agency and everything. I'm still of the mindset of locking up quantities that what you've got with them,
I think that with not to cut you off, but I think that as much as Boris represents Conforto and Boris loves to test free agency, Conforto has said that I wouldn't mind being a Met my entire career. There's something special that happened with him with the organization. There's, spiritually, it seems to be a good fit for him. And also I think that on the one hand, having Lindor say, give me $300 million, which is what we expect his agent is saying. On the one hand, it's a moment where you go, how much is going to be left in the coffers for my guy afterwards? But it's also a moment where Conforto's agent can say, maybe we don't test free agency. I can see the purse strings are loose right now. Let's just go for it, because I think this is probably as good as it's going to get. Bearing in mind what the next couple of years could hold. So in a weird twist of fate, if Conforto's agent is smart, I think he's going to see the Lindor contract negotiation as setting a bar of how much money his client can get. And I think he'll, they've got every reason to pay a pretty penny for Conforto in the same way that they're paying for Lindor. And I think that those two negotiations happening at the same time are actually beneficial for Conforto in a weird twist of fate.
I agree, and I just can foresee the fact that while you're doing this and while you're cementing these costs and locking guys up in their prime, that's the other thing too, that the Mets have been the type of team under the Wilpons for years of picking up guys that weren't necessarily in their prime, or I'm paying you for the players you were, not the player you are now.
Yeah. Well, it's a rare moment in a baseball player's history where experience and youth are both on their side, and both of them fall into that category where you're not burnt out yet, but you're not a greenhorn. You know exactly what you're doing, and you know what to do when you're out there, and you're reliable. You're not a and people know what they're getting with you too.
Yeah. The Mets are a team that, if you go back through our history, only back to, say, the 80s, 90s or so, when we had, when we had Darryl Strawberry. Darryl Strawberry was the team leader in home runs in a year, with 35 home runs. That was supplanted only after him by, I believe it was Todd Hundley, who broke his record with 41 home runs, which was also about as a catcher too, which was amazing. Piazza's excellent years and everything. Our team has never been one where it's a blowaway stats or everything. With Alonso last year, or I'm sorry, not last year, but 2 years ago, his rookie year, with him breaking the rookie of the year home run record, the National League home run record for a season, et cetera, et cetera. It's the first time in our Mets history, honestly, that we've had these kind of things. Except for, say, the odd, Dwight Gooden winning a Cy Young in his rookie year, like Tom Seavers, like the legendary things. So the players that are playing now, nailing down these guys in their prime to make the contributions that we need them to make on a playoff contending team in a division that, albeit is a very, very, very competitive division.
One. It's brutally tough this year. On the one hand, I would love it if there was going to be some, if there was some easy meat in the division, that would be great. But I just think we're going to see aggressive, competitive baseball with everyone going. Nothing is a lock. There is not a team in the NL East this year where you can be like, okay, well, we lost the last three, but we know we're going to, sorry guys, Florida, and we know we can count on beating up on them for a little bit. Although that's never happened in the Mets past. They're like, oh, they got to go to Florida and make some of these losses up, and they always get, when Florida were in the when the Marlins were in the absolute basement, we would get shellacked by them. It was the most insulting thing. We would cream the team in first place and then go get taken to school by the Marlins when the Marlins were not good. And by the way, Marlins fans, you're looking arguably that's the thing. I think it's an interesting thing being a Marlins fan right now, because they kind of have this sort of wing and a prayer thing. Like we're playing very smart baseball. We don't have the budgets. We don't have the player. We don't have the star power. But we found a way to be competitive. And I so relate to that, because that was, in 2015, like when we got to the World Series, when we had hopes in 2016, like when we got to that wild card and were shut down by Mad Bum, the whole thing hinged around like, maybe, you never know, like this plucky bunch of misfits and upstarts that we've MacGyvered together under the guidance of Terry Collins might actually do something.
Well, now that we're still in the mode of first of all, COVID is going to be with us and affecting how teams are staffed this year. Very similar to last year, even though it was a shortened season, the way that they had to, maintain the taxi cab squads, etc. If there's an outbreak or something, we're still in a hazy kind of way trying to get this season in. But in terms of the unbalanced schedule, so that our division, we are playing each one of those teams, we're playing them 16 times each. Say all those teams are, good, which they are relatively all kind of looking. We're all going to be beating the crap out of each other, meaning that, no one's record, say, necessarily is blowing anybody away, and we're all kind of middling in there. That's going to take possibly NL East teams out of the talk for the wild card, and it's going to make it so that if a team's really succeeding in the NL Central, like a Milwaukee Brewers or like someone like that, all they need to do is have a better record than necessarily one of the teams in the NL East to, say, cement themselves with a wild card position, while a team like the Mets playing really well against a bunch of teams that are playing really well. We're all battling for that division title in order to make the playoffs. If the playoffs this year, and I don't know if I've seen what the latest agreement now between Major League Baseball and the Players Association is. Is it similar? Is it going to be similar to last year where it's an expanded playoff, or that was still a bone of contention that they were debating back and forth, I think. So I don't even know if it's an expanded 2 wild card teams per league, et cetera, and everything. So this is going to be an interesting year, not only in terms of monitoring how injured players do, but COVID-related things are going to be with us through this season, and it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very, very interesting.
I really like the way, I really like the way Lindor has carried himself going into these negotiations. And look, you talk to some old timers, like, you hear Gary, Keith, and Ron talk about it when you watch Mets games, where Lindor has said, like, if we don't reach an agreement come opening day, then I'm going to free agency. Keith and Ron will both be like, that's just something you say. Like, if they, if Cohen wants to step up with $300 million at some point in the middle of the season, I guarantee you Lindor's agent is listening to that conversation. But I really, he's really stressed it over and over again. And he's been firm, and I just really admire how he's handled himself. And as much as I would love for him to just roll over, take whatever Cohen offers him, and be a Met for the next 10 years, that would make me very happy. I really admire the way he has been direct and firm and fair in his dealings with the Mets, in his dealings with the press, and his dealings with us as fans, because he's been very sort of like, what you see is what you get. This is what I'm saying. This is how I feel. And like, I genuinely admire how he's done this stuff, and I genuinely admire how he has sort of been steadfast in it and just has been a no-nonsense guy. And I think that on the field, off the field thing, it really speaks to the quality of his character. And I also, as a guy who's been through a bunch of contract negotiations where I've got the lousy end of the stick, I can tell you, usually it's the person signing the check who says, like, this deal expires on this day. It's not usually me going, my offer of even talking to you about this expires on this day. And that's exactly what Lindor did. It was basically like, hold on, zip, flop, check this out. It's something that you're going to have to deal with right now. Right now. I'm holding all the cards.
And he's walking into a scenario, like a best case scenario. This is literally the show 'em what you got period of new ownership, new front office, etc. Coming in. So it's practically the perfect time for all of this, because the Mets front office and ownership, I kind of think their backs are a little bit to the wall of proving, yes, we do. We talk the talk and we walk the walk. So that's why I see these negotiations, as they said in the Phantom Menace, negotiations will be short. I think we hear literally a definitive answer before Thursday. I don't think they're going to play with fire about it, and that'll happen. If Conforto's goes into the season, that would not surprise me at all. As much as I would like to think that they're chewing gum and walking at the same time and getting multiple things done,
it's funny because like Lindor was very clear about it from the get-go. He was like, I've never once negotiated anything during the season. I don't do that. That's not a thing I do. Do not talk to me about this. I got to focus on the game and winning baseball and putting us in a position to win. And, it's not fair to me. It's not fair to the team to like have these conversations when the focus should be doing the job of playing baseball. Conforto wasn't so hard and fast about like the expiration date on his negotiations. And I think lately he's maybe picked up on a little bit of it from Lindor, because I feel like the expiration date on the talks that we're having, the whole let the smooth move let the smooth move T take its course or get off the pot situation seems to have developed hand in hand with those two. And
well played.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You know what I really when Lindor when it was first announced that Lindor was going to be a part of the Mets, that first press conference, people kept using the expression leader. Are you going to be a leader in the clubhouse? We've heard you're a great leader. Are you a leader? And he was like, no, I'm just Francisco Lindor. I got to come and be the best version of me. And he is 100 million% a leader, and he does it without being like, everybody listen to me. He leads by example. He leads by showing up at the ballpark first and leaving last. And like, you even see people like JD Davis going like, man, that guy, clearly knows what he's doing. And I see him working so hard in practice, and it makes me feel like, well, I'm not that. I should probably, get after it. And he's a leader without ever once announcing himself as a leader. He was like, nah, I'm not a leader. No, I'm just Francisco Lindor. And he just leads by as an example. And to the point where Rojas is almost calling him a coach. And it's so telling. Like, everything that they want him to be, he has been in spring training, except for that 0-for-7 skid at the beginning. He's hit grand slams. He's produced in the clutch. His production has been amazing. He's been reliable on the field. He's inspired his teammates. He's, hey, JD Davis, as a guy who's got a bit of a history as an infielder, maybe try this. And, Davis is totally open to it because he's led by example with his work ethic. So everything that you need him to be, to get over the fact that the ravioli sucked at dinner the other night and make with the $300 million before opening day on Thursday, is in place. And he's done such an amazing job. He's basically given a clinic of how to act in contract negotiations.
True, but, and this has to be known. He's been doing it in Florida. Now go to New York.
Yeah.
And in the Klieg lights are going on Thursday. Like the spotlight is now on you as of Thursday in the biggest market. And it's those that can do it in that environment that really, really, really will impress. And that's another thing. If you've noticed the last couple of games, Mike Piazza has a physical presence in spring training, sitting down with the guys, etc. And I'm very certain that he's had multiple sit downs with Lindor, saying, "Listen, so I was the guy who came in, from outside into New York
again, and right on the cusp of free agency as well. Like, there's obviously every deal is individual. Every deal is its own thing, and every person and player is unique. But like, there are so many parallels between the Piazza and Lindor situation, which,
totally,
in and of itself puts a bit of an unfair, bias on the way people are going to look at Lindor. Like, he's our next Piazza. Okay, we were hoping for another slugging catcher, but look, all these similarities. But there are so many similarities, you just can't get around it.
But that is another element of coming to New York, and why a whole lot of really good players have shown that they couldn't handle the pressure and the large eye on them in New York, and that goes back for a long history of a bunch of players.
Who do you think the best example of someone who couldn't take the heat in New York City is? Like, specifically on the Mets, like someone who came in that was supposed to be the be all end all and just couldn't take the pressure of being in New York City, couldn't handle how things went with the press, the fans, whatever it is, whatever sort of like pieces of emotional baggage come with being a player on the New York Mets in New York City. Who do you think most noticeably crumbled underneath that pressure?
I mean, I hate to say it this way, but you're talking about a couple of players that their histories were that they were fantastic players, and then they came to the Mets at the still in their great years, and the numbers just didn't match up. They couldn't produce the same way. Carlos Baerga was a fantastic player, came into the Mets, and he couldn't attain the type of play that he had consistently done before. Roberto Alomar, came in and he was basically on track for Hall of Fame career. leading up to coming in, and it just didn't cut the mustard. There are players that transcended it. They weren't necessarily came in to be the savior of the team, and were looked at as somebody who had to perform at that level. But like the John Olaruds that had played in other places and had done it so well and came here and did it so well. So there's Keith Hernandez is such a fantastic example.
Yeah,
Keith should be in the Hall of Fame.
Keith should be in the freaking Hall of Fame, and I have I have to imagine, like, I don't even know who really makes that decision, but like I have to imagine someone has a problem with Keith if he's not in there, because there's no reason on God's green earth why that shouldn't have been a lock years ago.
Yeah, the way that the voting goes for 10 years of appearances on the ballots of the baseball writers, and what percentage you've gotten of those baseball writers for those 10 years, and whether there's been support for your candidacy or not support, by that 10-year term, if you have not attained a certain percentage, you're basically taken off, and now you could be reconsidered under the Veterans Committee, which I believe the Veterans Committee will be looking at Keith Hernandez's credentials, and it would not surprise me if both Keith and Don Mattingly both regain a new attention in terms of the Hall of Fame at some point. And it's just unfortunate how they go about their things and the protocols that they've done over all these years. It doesn't make a huge amount of sense related to the Hall of Fame. But
I wonder, like, Keith Hernandez. Have you read his book yet?
No, I really should.
I'm Keith Hernandez. Like, get the audio book, because it's his story in his words, read by him, and Keith. There's nothing better. There's a lot of stats in there, and he dives pretty deep into a lot of that stuff. But he does a fantastic job at telling his story. But when he talks about the period after baseball, it kind of sort of, you get the impression that he wanted little or nothing to do with any of it. He's like, this is done now. I'm kind of not lost, but, definitely not found. And I wonder if his sort of non-participation in the world of baseball, which he was pretty resolute with after, I'll have to reread the passage, but from what I seem to remember, after baseball, he kind of went, that's enough of that. And I wonder if he sort of, if you're looking at that 10-year period after you hang it up of people making that decision, he was probably not kissing babies and pressing flesh, from what I read in his book.
Yeah, Keith had a checkered past through his throughout his entire career, and here's a perfect example of putting up Hall of Fame numbers for years, and then came to the Mets, and the impact that he had on the Mets in New York for the years that he was here, winning a World Series. I mean, his Gold Gloves, his presence on the diamond. I mean, just those things alone. And Don Mattingly was having a similar type of career in New York and doing it. And the unfortunate thing with Don Mattingly, for two things, he was on Yankee teams that weren't playoff bound teams for years. In fact, his final year after developing an injury, a long-term sustaining injury similar to what David Wright had, where it was kind of like, I'm not going to be able to play anymore. He got to play in his last year was when the Yankees went to the playoffs against Seattle, and he did great, but they didn't win, and so it was unfortunate for him that was the only time that he ever got to go to the playoffs. But Don Mattingly was having a Hall of Fame career for the New York Yankees in New York. That's a goldfish bowl. I mean, so Lindor to come up to New York, either contracted, if he's extended now 10, 11 years, and he is now the face of the Mets, the face of New York, and now he comes in and he delivers. It's, oh my God, it's going to be, not only is it going to be fantastic, but traditionally with the Mets, there's always been a catalyst of somebody coming in, and it just makes it such a destination, so that, you know, when Piazza came in, there was all these other players that now really wanted to play for the Mets. So, you know, the Robin Venturas and you know, guys that came in. When Pedro Martinez came over, it was, you know, he didn't have a very, very long amount of time, but it raised the stakes for the team of like other players saying, wow, this is truly a destination. The Mets, I believe, are looking like a very good positive destination, but there's two parts to that. There's the players that can handle New York, and so if they're going to come here, you got to be a special player to be a Met, in my opinion, and that's not just being a Mets fan. It's based on the fact that watching the team for years and watching the players that have come through and have been around, there's a certain Met, there's a certain thing for you to, one, to succeed, two, to really fit in, and you combine those elements. You're cementing yourself with a team, you know, a unique team. And you know, it sounds such a like a homer of you know, hey, being a Met, it's so special. It honestly is. It's a unique, special thing. And there's
you are the perpetual underdogs. You know, like it does not matter. It doesn't matter how big your payroll is. It doesn't matter. Like you are the perpetual underdog, and I kind of like that. You know, having felt like, I think those of us that, you know, have, for whatever reason, you know, those of us that have chosen careers in music or broadcasting or radio or whatever, if we've wound up that, chances are we're not an obvious fit for the, you know, for what everybody else does. We weren't necessarily accepted by I think that's why you see so many sort of like punk rock and hardcore fans, you know, like obviously there's deep punk rock and hardcore roots in New York City, specifically in Queens. But I think that's big part of the reason why you see so many of these people gravitating to the New York Mets. You know, like my dad's a Yankee fan, but I just don't fit in with the rest of my freaking family. Go Mets. Like there is a plucky upstart underdog situation to the Mets that you do have to be, and it's tough to combine that with a winning mentality, but you got to be that. And when you're someone like Piazza, when you're someone like, I think, Lindor, you can do that. You can be all the right stuff to all the right people, and you can truly embody the spirit of this team that we love so much for a reason, because it's easy.
No, you're exactly right. You're exactly right for that. So, you know, in essence, it's the way Lindor is carrying himself, I think you're right. I think he's showing himself, he's showing who he is, and what he's going to be like. And I can just literally see that extrapolated into New York City and being the guy. I think it's going to be fantastic. So one other thing that happened today in a parallel type of thing, one player that you and I are particularly huge fans of, had a bit of a decisive thing happen. Jerry Blevins had to literally, like they were going to send it. He wasn't going to make the starting lineup, and it was announced literally today. And he had already kind of said that, you know, I came back literally just to play for the Mets. If I don't make it, I'm going to retire. And you know, like I saw the announcement this afternoon after the game that he had not made the opening day roster, and I felt really bad about it. And then it was fantastic. Maybe half an hour, 45 minutes later, I saw a tweet from him saying, "I'm going to report."
I've got it up. You want me to read it?
Yeah, please.
He said, I'll be going to and living in Brooklyn to report to the alternate site. I feel great. My body and my arm have responded beyond my expectations. Hope to see you all in Queens soon. Let's go Mets. Nothing but love. And like that, you know what you're talking, like that attitude of like what makes someone a Met. And it's why he came out of retirement when the Mets went, hey, you feel like coming back and taking care of some unfinished business. He was like, yeah, this is the Mets. I have a spiritual connection to this team. I would love to see my kid. I would love to have my kid get to see me pitch in a Mets uniform. So I have so much admiration for what he's doing, because he could have gone like, well, screw it, not on the opening day roster. I'm going to go home and be a family man. But like he's, you know, like he won't have Francisco Lindor money, but I'm sure he's doing just fine. Thank you very much. After pitching reliably in Major League Baseball for several years, like he doesn't have to work, I'm guessing. So like this is exactly what you are talking about. And it was a bummer not to see him make opening day, but at the same time, man, like it's just, that's the sense, that is the definition of the player that you want being a New York Met.
Yeah. And who knows what's going to happen? We said it on the last podcast. We were discussing it. Injuries happen. You're not in control of anything. The Chicago White Sox just literally have a situation where what is it? Elroy Jimenez. He went back to basically climb over the fence to steal a home run, and he ripped his pec muscle, and he's now done. Cespedes is sitting somewhere going, "K?" Yasiel Puig has not been picked up by anybody yet, and it was looking kind of like, wow, is he going to get a chance or anything? That's exactly now where the White Sox should be like, hello, okay, can you come to Chicago? So I mean, things change so rapidly in the game, and with COVID being an element to all this and everything. So for Jerry, he's 37 years old. Yes, you're coming to the tail end. 10 years from now, you could say, I was done and I was finished. You're 37. If there's even the chance right now that you can make the Mets in during the season or say the playoffs, as just a hope, if it's possible and you could do it, hell yeah, do it. It's such a great feel good story to this season, and it also parallels to a couple of things that happened today in terms of. Mike Montgomery, they released basically because he had an opt out, and they didn't pick him, so they had to make a very, very hard decision on whether to keep him or not. They're still finalizing placements of who's making the actual 26-man roster, pitching staff as well as bullpen. There's a spot here or there. There's a spot here or there on the 40-man that they have to, kind of decide. This is still a crucial time coming right down to the opening day, but it's just the opening day. Like. Game 2, something could drastically change the whole trajectory of what's going on.
Also, as the pen goes, our season goes. Doesn't matter how many bombs Alonso hits. Doesn't matter how many doubles and grand slams Lindor comes up with. Doesn't matter how many Cy Young performances DeGrom turns in. If the pen blows it, the pen blows it, and we've seen it happen time and time and time again. And I think that like Familia, has fared better this spring training than I thought he would. I love Familia. I love the fact that he's playing in a Mets uniform. He was our 9th inning assassin, and you just you have that burning hope that something's going to happen with him. But the guy's a heart attack. Familia and Betances are a heart attack, and there's not as much as Familia seemed promising. It wasn't the lights out thing that we've come to know and love. Well, that we came to know and love from him a few years back. And I genuinely feel like, given the pen being what the pen is, I would be very, very surprised if we don't see Jerry Blevins pitching in Queens at some time in the not too distant future. And also, we were talking about Mets that crumbled under pressure when arriving in Queens that couldn't take it. The book is still out on Diaz. He had a disastrous first season with us. He seemed to look up a little bit in the last season. I think not having fans at the ballpark was probably the best thing for him. Not having to just walk out to boo from the get-go was probably a good way for him to settle in a little bit. And he's had a very promising spring training, but the guy showed up significantly different than what we expected a couple of years ago. Things are looking good, but I just feel like the one noticeable weak spot that we've got in the Mets for the last couple of years is our pen. If there's going to be one thing people are going to be looking at doing, it's okay, we know we can't beat DeGrom, but just get to the pen, get to the do whatever you can to run the pitch count up so we can get to the pen and we can try and beat up on them. That will be the strategy, I think, for opposing batters going into this season, because it's not a secret what we're working with. And I just think you're going to see so many different iterations of our pen as they try and figure out what to do with it. I want it to be awesome, but I have a feeling we're going to see Jerry Blevins pitching sooner rather than later.
I agree, and it's a whole nother element of the fact that we're only carrying like basically right now one legitimate lefty. In terms of the pen, we're facing a division that has a lot of lefty heavy hitters on the Braves. Cool. Freeman, like with Hart. I mean, like all the teams in the NL East, there's a lot of lefties.
Quite frankly, I was expecting Blevins to be Blevins to be a part of it from the get-go. Because of that, because we don't, like our pen is what it is. And also, we're deficient in lefty pitching, and there's, a lot of lefty hitting out there. So I was a little surprised by that. I have to imagine like he's a great guy with a great attitude that really wants to play for the Mets. It's his sort of like spiritual home as a baseball player, no matter how much he's been a bit of a journeyman over the years. But I have to imagine, he came out of retirement to do this. They don't have to do anything for him or with him. So I have to imagine they had to talk with him and be like, look, we know we're going to use you. Just go continue being good in Brooklyn. And you know it. I know it. We all know it. The day will come. But we just, we can't. Maybe they're looking at opposing lineups for the first couple games and going like, okay, no Blevins. We don't need to use that spot for a lefty, but we will.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely key. Obviously, we've got coaching staff in front office, et cetera. A lot of people that are paid the big money to make the big decisions. And I am fully aware that even the most attentive fans like us and others that really pay attention to things, there's the behind the scenes elements that it must be there's rationales and reasons for why and what they're doing and how they're putting it together and how they're putting this team together. And I like what I've been seeing from a fan perspective. I can question every decision, every in-game decision, every front office decision, et cetera. I can wear my heart on a sleeve as a true fan and, just look at things and, through rose-colored glasses that way. But, I'm imagining and hoping that they're making smart, intelligent baseball decisions to put us in the best position to go forward. And, with a full knowledge of what the shortcomings have been for the last couple of years of the pen, full knowledge of how the team itself has had defensive problems, and they've been working on that.
It does appear, again, small sample size, but you and I were saying the other day, it looks like they might have patched some holes.
Yeah, I've been impressed. I've been impressed by JD's defense from what I've seen in there. I mean, obviously Guillorme's he's a stop. He's a stopgap. There's a hole in the boat, and you stuff him in. Stuff him in the hole. So and I love that. And McNeil made a fantastic play at second base. I've watched Alonso's defense at first base, and I think he's stepped his game up. Watching Lindor put on a clinic at shortstop has been fantastic. Well, and even the other elements in the outfield, like Almora, I thought has done a really nice job stepping in, and we always used to look at Juan Lagares and say, oh man, it'd be so great if he could hit, because his defense was really nice.
Gold glove, but oops, Butterfingers behind the plate.
Yeah, exactly. So I like the things that I'm seeing. We're gonna ride the ups, we're gonna ride the downs. Hopefully, there's a lot more ups. I'm feeling very, very positive about how things have been going. Did we dominate in spring training? I don't care about dominating spring training. I care about seeing everybody working on plays, fundamentals being really established. All of those elements of spring training, and this last week of spring training, nobody get hurt.
Yeah,
please.
Yeah. No, yeah. Just you can let that one go. It's just it's funny because obviously everybody wanted to get Springer. We didn't get Springer, and Springer is a great defensive center fielder, and so everyone's looking at Nimmo super hard, and he made that incredible diving catch the other day, and he's made some key decisions. I'm going to play deeper because I'm better running forward than I am backward, and so That's actually, yes, the puppy is in agreement with us. But like
Mookie Wilson completely agrees with your statement.
But like, we saw him do that, and he made that unbelievable diving catch, and we're like, okay, it looks like he's upped his game as a defensive center fielder. No more of that. No more diving anything. You just put bubble wrap until you're done. Do you think that, going back to what we started with, Lindor's contract negotiations, as he, nears do or not day, opening day, the way we're talking about the Mets defense having improved, specifically with the infield, the way we're seeing it, not be as much of a heart attack, the way it's starting to inspire confidence. Do you think, and Lindor wouldn't do this, he'll leave it up to his agent. That's the other thing I love so much about his thing. He's like, that's my agent's job. Like, I want to be happy, smile, good baseball player guy. I don't need to like get into the nitty grit with people in the dugout. But like, do you think his agent's going to be like, hey, notice how your infield sucks less? You want to take a wild guess at why that might be? You want to know whose influence that might be? Because I'll never forget when Metallica were auditioning bass players, and to make a parallel to music, which we do on this show sometimes, Robert Trujillo, who used to play bass in Suicidal Tendencies and used to play bass with Ozzy Osbourne and used to play bass with Infectious Grooves, is a very, very good bass player. Like, the guy is accomplished. The guy is practiced. The guy is a really, really competent musician. And when they offered Rob Trujillo the gig playing bass in Metallica, James Hetfield said, "We play better with you in the band. Like, Lars is a better drummer when you're the bass player. I'm singing and playing better. Like, because of you coming in and raising the bar." Ray might be seething because you're a bass player. I don't know what you think of Rob Trujillo as a bass player, but
Rob still gives me, first of all, I think Rob's great, and he still credits me to this day of him learning how to play properly all the songs on Injustice for All from my Injustice for All Now with Bass version that I gave him.
No kidding. Wait, no, hold up. Like, this is an amazing story. Like, because explain what Injustice for All with Bass is. For those that are maybe not as ensconced in the metal community, explain a little backstory. Go ahead, please. The
backstory is basically that I'm a bass player, primarily guitarist, secondary, but in all the bands that I've played in for all of my years, et cetera, like that, I always wound up playing guitar, but bass is one of my main instruments. And my favorite, one of my favorite albums was Injustice for All when it came out, but it was the first. Second album technically with Jason, because they did Garage Days, which had a lot more of a raw sound to it. But the production of Injustice for All back in the 90s, there was no bass in it at all, and I was always seething about it.
This is a for those that are not involved in the metal world, if you want for fun as an experiment, go back and listen to Metallica's Injustice for All album. But like it's been so talked about since the album came out all those years ago that the bass is more or less non-existent in the mix.
Right. So what I did was a couple of years after that. This was 2003 that I did this. I took the entire Injustice for All album, dumped it into Pro Tools, and in a single take of each song, I played 5-string bass over the entire thing, remixed it, called it Injustice for All Now with Bass. I made a nice little cover of it, and I put a little sticker in the corner saying "Coming soon, real snare sound," because the snare's horrible on it. And I just coincidentally, I never posted it. I mean, back in the day, there was no posting, but I never sold it. I never distributed it or anything like that because I was very conscious of the Metallica's ownership of and all those kind of things.
Yeah, you didn't want to get popped.
No. So what I did do is I only made copies for people in the industry and gave it to them. And back at that time, I was the production manager for System of a Down, and we were on tour on Ozfest. Direct support to Ozzy with Robert playing bass for him. So I literally got a chance to hand every member of Metallica my Injustice for All Now with Bass CD, saying, "Here, I fixed your record."
Oh, you did that? How did that go over when you handed that? Here, let me help you out here.
Oh, it was hysterical because, like, each one of them kind of looked at it kind of scoffingly and like, oh, whatever you're talking about. Jason, the bass player before Robert, I gave it to him, and he said, "Oh, I always wanted to do this," and I just cut him off. I said, "Yeah, well, now you don't have to because I did." And then I gave it to Robert because we were on tour together, and still to this day, when I run into him, every once in a while, he completely, just very very nicely says, "Ray," he's like, I completely give you credit that you taught me how to play the bass lines to Justice for All." And I tell him, Robert, as long as you keep telling people that, it's totally cool. And we've been in circumstances where he's told that they actually did an interview in Playboy magazine back in the day and mentioned my version of it. And since then, what's funny? We have been friends for decades now. We have known each other. We've talked about a lot of stuff. I have heard of the And Justice for All Now with bass thing, but I can't remember. It wasn't like I heard of that before I knew you did it. Like I knew it was circulating. I knew it was, but it only came to light that was you. Like, so its reputation preceded you telling me that you did it. Well, since then, other bass players have done it, and it's gotten actually a kind of not, I wouldn't call it a mixed review, but in the history of it now, even James has talked about it, saying we don't want to go back and redo things like this, and so there's been other criticisms and everything, and I've actually participated in some metal forums and everything saying, hey, I was the first one to do it, and no, I never sold it. I never posted it for download or anything like that out of respect to people, and it just literally became an inside joke kind of thing. It was
viral before viral was a thing. It was really
right.
It was
really
the original
incredible.
Viral. It was the original viral. And it's funny, Jason Newsted, former bass player of Metallica, the guy who famously had his bass parts mixed unbelievably low on that album, he's actually gone on the record and said, like, you know what, I'm not mad about it now. Like, looking back on it, like that album is a piece of history and everything about it is what it is. And going back and changing it, but it was such a big deal. Like, it was such a big deal. And I have to imagine it kind of crushed him when he heard the final mixes and went, no, okay, never mind.
Well, like I said, for me personally, it was just another project to do of like, I'm just going to do this. And like I said, to this day, I still give it to friends of mine in the business or in the industry as just like here, have this. And I've never posted it online. I've never made it available for download or anything. It's just a referable piece of thing. And like I said, Robert's always been super, super cool of it. And Robert's a fantastic bass player. I'm not saying I taught Robert how to play bass. I'm saying that it was a great reference.
He didn't have to he could hear the bass. He wouldn't have to if he was trying to learn all those bass parts, he would have had to really, really kind of messed with EQs. He would have had to work very hard to figure out exactly what was going on. But having that probably made it a million times easier for him to learn the music and get the gig of a lifetime.
From what I remember, somebody told me that the first time James Hetfield had heard it, he was riding with a friend of his that had it and said, "Here, wait, you got to hear this." And so they were driving down the road, and the first song fades in, and as it fades in, and the bass is now coming into it. Supposedly, James just listened and said, "Where's all this bass coming from? Turn that down!" What's
wrong with my car stereo?
Yeah, and his friend was like, "No, listen to this. This is and I didn't make it obnoxiously loud in the mix, but it is like I consider it like the Stanley Clark version of that record. It's and it was fun, and I'm a fan of fun musical endeavors or experiments and comical things. If you've never heard of a band called Tragedy, who are the greatest heavy metal Bee Gees cover band in the tri-state area, and that's literally how they. That's what
it says on the flyer.
That's what it says on the flyer. And their first record is "We Rock Sweet Balls and Can Do No Wrong," and they are literally fantastic, and they do amazing metal versions, not even metal, like hard rock versions of Bee Gees songs, and they do them so well. And I love comical things like that.
Well, I mean, like the fact that you did it and look what happened, like you did it for fun, for giggles, because you had a bit, it was something that you wanted to do. And you had a bit of a bee in your bonnet about it being a bass player. That was a lot of bees. I'm amazed.
A whole lot of bees.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of bees. But you had a bee in a bonnet because you're a bass player. And so you went and did it. And then, guy from Metallica kind of sort of got his gig in part because he listened to it and was able to effectively learn the parts. This supports my theory that some of the greatest things that have ever been accomplished were accomplished by people with a little too much time on their hands. And if you would have talked to Einstein about it back in the day, he'd be like, most of my quote unquote discoveries were just me having time to mess around in the lab. John Cleese will tell you that if you want people to do great work, give them time to play. And, the last time the Gorillaz played in New York City, Damon Albarn from Blur and Jamie Hewlett, the animator that came up with Tank Girl. Last time Gorillaz played in New York City, where was it? Citi Field, where our beloved Mets play. They are a stadium band that was invented out of boredom one day. Like Damon Albarn, Jamie Hewlett, roommates back in the 90s. I got nothing to do. There's nothing good on TV. What if I write this song and you sort of like illustrate it? What happened then? It was just sort of like, it was something that came to be out of boredom and a little bit too much time on their hands. This is a huge off ramp to take, but it supports my theory that some of the greatest things humankind has ever accomplished was accomplished by people with, like I said, some free time. Back to Francisco Lindor. So do we think, based on the fact that James Hetfield told Rob Trujillo after he learned how to play Metallica songs by listening to your bass parts on And Justice for All Now with bass, do we think that Francisco Lindor, in the same way that Metallica said playing with you makes us a better musician, do we think that the defensive upside that we've been seeing with the Mets is due to having Francisco Lindor on the field? Because I think that there's no way you can get around it.
Yeah, I think he raises the stakes for it. And as I mentioned, the band Tragedy, the greatest Bee Gees heavy metal tribute in the tri-state area, as their second album was entitled "Humbled by Our Greatness." I believe the Mets should be humbled by the greatness of Lindor. I think he literally is inspirational. He's the perfect age. He's not a kid. He's 27, so he's accomplished and he's come through the ringer. So the younger players that are on the Mets, the guys that actually the rookies had a great take during spring training of being around him and watching his work ethic and everything. The guys he's playing with that are the same age as him, he raises the stakes. And if he is on the team, say for another 10, 11 years, that's borderline, legendary status in terms of longevity on a single team. Mm-hmm. And he if he continues to play the way he is, he'll be looked back in the history of the team as one of the greats who ever played on our team. The way that Carlos Beltran is looked at. Carlos Beltran, I think, is a good parallel.
People might look at him a little bit differently now.
Oh, for
is that
stupid,
a trash can that I hear in the background?
For stupid reasons. But Carlos Beltran, before he came to the Mets, was a fantastic player in on the other teams that he was on, and he's arguably one of the best players that has ever come to the Mets and delivered through his entire career. So I very much make a comparison of say Lindor to how Piazza came here, how Carlos Beltran came here. I think he's gonna put on a show. I think he's gonna raise the game on everybody.
Well, in the 10, 15, I don't know, he's 28 now. Let's say 12 years from now, you and I think he's going to be going into the Hall of Fame as a New York Met. And that's the sort of thing that people get angry at you for saying because you're jinxing stuff, but I don't care. I just said it because that's what I believe.
I agree. And it goes back to something that I actually said on the podcast about 2 weeks ago. I I think a lot of players contractually will be contracted, say, up to their 38, 39-year-old year, which means for Lindor, I'd say a 10 or 11-year deal sounds like the right kind of deal for him. If they start talking 12 or 13 years, or if his insistence say, or his agent's insistence.
I was just padding the 2 years on to give him time to get into the Hall of Fame. I figured yeah.
But a guy that's going after Hall of Fame numbers coming into his 38, 39 year, that's there's two thought processes on it, and I know the Angels are going through that right now with Pujols. Pujols is a Hall of Fame player, like first ballot, no problem. Mm-hmm. But he's now a 40-year-old player on the tail end of a long-term, long deal that is kind of
to hear agencies talk about it and the rest.
Yeah, you're exactly. It's become an albatross around the neck of the team in terms of what it seems that they can do to put other players around Trout in his prime. Uh-huh. So is Pujols doing something fantastic by going for Hall of Fame level numbers into his late years of his career, or is he blocking other players or their opportunity for them to expand the team in a way that really benefits Mike Trout in his best years, so that the Angels could be going for titles, that the Angels could be making the playoffs? They've got a player like Mike Trout on the longest term deal, and Mike Trout is he's a lock. He is going to deliver, but he can't deliver by himself. Mm-hmm.
This goes back to Lindor. We couldn't afford, and the Indians saying we offered him $200 million. He said no, we can't afford to make him the only piece of this puzzle that works, that fits.
Right.
You're totally right, and it goes back to we got to stop. We've gone on for way too long. But it does go back to it does go back to our initial conversation when we were talking about free agency and talking about team control and when people hit it. The sad fact of the matter is, oftentimes, if you are one of those legendary players that is a lock for the Hall of Fame and you're going for whatever title, whatever number, whatever broken record is you're going for before you finish out your career, it's almost like someone like Pujols. Not Pujols specifically, because there's got to be fans of his that get mad that I say this, but a player in his position, you're almost better off going to somewhere like Pittsburgh, where you're going to be the star piece. You're going to be playing every day. You're going to get all the at bats. You're going to have every chance to finish out your career with the numbers that you want to finish it with, which is a weird thing because everybody should be trying to put themselves in a position to compete. But I don't know. I don't know enough about what Pujols is done the last couple of years to know if it's a disservice to Mike Trout to put him in a lineup with Mike Trout in it, thinking that we might get him his numbers, but at what cost to Mike, when he deserves a team that's going to put a ring on it.
His numbers have trailed off a little bit in terms of his age, and but the financial burden of that expensive contract through this time has made it tough for them. So, for instance, they signed Anthony Rendon just 2 years ago. They've got Ohtani. They've got pieces. They got parts, but they're lacking in pitching right now. And there was a lot of criticism that they should be the ones. They should have been the ones going out for a big starting pitcher to really shore up the team. And they had to talk finances a bit of whether they could afford to do it or not. And
were they involved? I think they were involved in Bauer, a little bit. I mean, everybody was involved in Bauer a little bit. Like it was a thought, and I think a lot of people thought it might have been a little bit more of a thought than imagined because he went to Los Angeles. He wanted to go home, and I think a lot of people thought hey, Angels have Trout, Angels are on the hunt, Angels, we're gonna whatever Bauer's gonna get people, his paycheck will be pretty much the same wherever he goes. There's not going to be someone, he's getting record-setting amounts of money, and there's not a couple million in either direction. It will probably not change where he decides to go. It's going to be more of a spiritual decision, as corny as it sounds to say that. And I feel like that whole Bauer could wind up on the Angels thing was pretty real for a second and then quickly went away.
True. Well, if you and I have talked this to death and we're going too long, I'll call you after the podcast and we'll keep talking about this like we normally do anyway.
We didn't even get to cooking today. I feel like we should talk about cooking. All right, really quick. Shall we talk about cooking now?
Sure.
All right, how did you make that meatloaf with a boiled egg in it? I've looked at the picture you sent me over and over again, an amazing, delicious-looking piece of meatloaf, and then he sends me a second picture. He's like, surprise, and it's cut in half, and there's half a boiled egg in there. How do you do that?
All right. Well, there's not a super like magic trick or anything to it, and I would preface everything by telling everyone. Obviously, we talk about barbecue, we talk about cooking. In terms of cooking, I'm a huge fan of your good old rock steady meatloaf. It's such a a grandma favorite of mine in terms of it. So every once in a while I get just a craving, and so this last week we had extra good chopped meat in the freezer that I was like, we got to use this. So I decided I'm going to make a meatloaf, and my wife in particular is as much of a fan of eggs that she is. She's never been a fan of the egg in the meatloaf, which my grandmother used to make it that way, and so I always recall it from that. And I particularly love eggs, and so to me it's always been it's fantastic. I
love a fried egg on a burger. Like, that's delicious. So I saw it. I was like, how am I not thinking of this? But but I'd never seen it happen before. I was like, how do you do that? What sorcery is this that you get a boiled egg in the middle of a meatloaf without it turning into something else?
I will tear down the fourth wall of the creativity of it. So in terms of your baking pan, your meatloaf pan that you're forming the meatloaf in, you're obviously you're taking your chopped meat, onions, other components that you'd make for breadcrumbs, especially because as a binder with meatloaf, it's very, very important. It's not just meat. You're making it for all intents and purposes very similar to a meatball in terms of you're using beef, breadcrumbs, egg, like actual like raw egg into it as a mixture, some milk, onions, salt and pepper, etc. You form the meat and literally crush it up in your hands and really massage it to make it into a meat paste. Mm-hmm. And as you now form the meatloaf in the pan, which I completely recommend to anyone, line the pan with tin foils to make it easier to take out. But once you've formed the meat into the pan, about halfway through, take 2 eggs and literally hard boil them for 12 minutes. And get them hard boiled and then cooled off, so that when you're taking them out of the shell, there's not. You're looking for a good hard boiled egg to start as a part of it.
See, this was my question. How do you at what point do you know to stop boiling the egg, because the cooking inside the meatloaf is going to take care of the rest of it? So 12 minutes of boiling the egg?
Yeah, you're making a hard-boiled egg prior to putting it in the meatloaf, so that you're not putting an egg with its shell or a soft-boiled egg in there, because of it would break apart. You're making a hard-boiled egg separately. You're letting it cool, and then when you're forming the meatloaf in the pan, lengthwise, depending on the size of the meatloaf you're making, but I took 2 hard-boiled eggs, placed them in the middle, continued to fill in the rest of the meat around it, so that the hard-boiled eggs are in the center of the meatloaf. And then you cook your meatloaf for roughly 45 to 55 minutes at 350. You coat the top of your meatloaf with a sauce that you make. So
this was going to be my next question. I was like, it looks like barbecue sauce on the top. He certainly did one better than I grew up eating, which was like, let's put ketchup on it. Like, what you say you coat it with a sauce? Please don't skip over the good part. Don't yada yada the sauce.
Well, then I'm not going to let you talk bad about ketchup, because grandma used ketchup.
Oh no, I like it. But what you have on your meatloaf, I'll post a picture with a podcast so people can see it. I was just like, I don't know what that is, but it looks fancy.
It's literally a mixture of ketchup, Worcestershire sauce, Worcestershire sauce, paprika, salt, pepper, and garlic.
Oh, by the way, like fun aside, I broke out the Hungarian paprika that you told me to get this past weekend just gone by. Didn't use it on beef the way you recommended. Use it on air fryer chicken wings. Delicious. But go on.
Amazing, right? And particularly the Hungarian type. There's several different smoked paprikas, hot paprika, etc. Hungarian has a bit of a sweetness to it, and it's a very it's a fine quality paprika. So in terms of spices, etc., big recommendation. I'm glad you got that, because it's a great addition. It's a great addition to everything. So I'm really glad you did that.
And it's subtle. Like I actually held off on it for a little while because I was doing some bigger smokes and I was just like, I don't want to put this on the entire roast if it turns out I don't like it. So like a chicken wing or two seemed like a good low stakes place to try it out, and I think it's going to be a part of my rubs going forward for pretty much everything. It was great. Good.
It's a staple. So yeah, the sauce that you would make is more like traditionally like my grandmother used to make it, and so it's a mixture of ketchup, Worcestershire sauce, garlic powder, salt, pepper, and paprika. And very important, don't cover the pan of your meatloaf in the oven. Let it cook so that sauce is kind of crusting a little bit, but it's also really, really maintaining the moisture content in the meatloaf. It won't be just this hard, dense, thick, not very liquidy kind of center. It makes it really, really moist and fantastic. And I particularly like it that way.
Well, as my grandmother used to say, that sounds fucking delicious.
Your grandmother was similar to my grandmother. My grandmother had an old Italian expression about that kind of stuff. Fuck that, she used to say.